person in a million can survive that.
Survive. That's just what we do.
Yeah!
Danger, I've been told to expect it. I begin my descent down the cold granite steps.
I just hope we can win a game.
And who could have turned among
Welcome back to Survivor 2024, presented by Seize the Gap Fantasy Football. I am Jamie G, Esquire, the fifth. And let me tell you, winning a 12-man jury is nice. It's a good feeling. But watching the Buffalo Bills get a win over the 12th man in Seattle is a great feeling. I am back with Magnum to keep those great feelings going in our NFL Survivor and Eliminator leagues. It's only week 9. Some Survivor leagues are already racing towards the finish line.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is crazy. Most NFL Survivor seasons are more like a J.J. Abrams movie. Like, there's a whole weird mystery thing going on. We get distracted by a bunch of weird stuff, and then it kind of ends, and we like it, okay, but we're really not sure what happened. This season, 2024 Survivor, is literally like an episode of The Wacky Races. But don't worry about that. We will help you avoid Dick Dastardly here on Survivor 2024, presented by Seize the Gap Fantasy Football. Thank you very much for checking out our show. You can find us wherever you get your pods and on YouTube. Find us on social media at Seize the Gap FF. Same place on the World Wide Web, seizethegapff.com. Very simple and easy to remember, just like the flaps, FLAPS. Oh, so very important to our success. Follow, like, and please subscribe. If you had fun, please remember to hit the thumb.
If we're doing a wacky racist thing, are we the Slag Brothers or the Gruesome Twosome? Inquiring minds need to know. See, there we go with the distractions. Let's open things up with transparency time. What are the results through week 8?
Overall, definitely not where we like, but last week, not as bad. In week 8, we both hit our locks. Jamie G, you were on the Broncos. I was on the Lions. Pretty easy there. We both hit our deeps. Jamie G, you had the Packers, and you had to sweat that one out. They threw a QB injury at you. The whole kitchen sink basically still got there. I had Houston, got there as well. We went with a double collabo fade with the Kansas City Chiefs. They did not lose. They won, so we missed our fade there. On the season, Jamie G, you are hitting 50% of your locks. I am at 63%. You are hitting 63% of your deeps, as am I, and you are a bit up in the fades. You've hit 38% of your fades, while I've only hit 25%. And not as clean of a week as we had in 6 and 7. We did get a few upsets last week. Baltimore, the Jets, Miami, Chicago, and the Rams all had varying degrees of ownership and took the L's. So at least we got a few people knocked out this week, because it seemed like we had everybody. You're in 30% of people knocked out every week, and then nobody got knocked out for 2 weeks. So a nice way to kind of split the difference. I just maybe wish we had bet on Baltimore or the Jets as one of our fades instead of maybe double banging the Kansas City. But I did like our logic, and I still think the logic remains sound. It's kind of trying to save Kansas City for a couple of very sweet upcoming matchups they have.
Let's get into week 9 here, and I don't know how y'all do it, but when I go to make my Survivor picks, the first thing I'm checking out are the point spreads. Mills, who are the biggest favorites of the week according to DraftKings Sportsbook?
We got some of the usual suspects here. We have the Baltimore Ravens up top, 9-point favorites at home against the Denver Broncos. The Kansas City Chiefs are 8.5-point favorites at home versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. My Philadelphia Eagles are 7.5-point favorites at home against the Jaguars. The Cincinnati Bengals are favored by a touchdown, 7 points at home against the Las Vegas Raiders. The New Orleans Saints are 7-point favorites traveling to Carolina. They're on the other end of the Panthers' rule this week. Jamie G, your Buffalo Bills are 6-point favorites at home versus the Miami Dolphins, while the Minnesota Vikings are 5-point favorites at home versus the Indianapolis Colts, being led by Joe Flacco. That's everybody favored by 5 or more points, and we have 2 teams on a bye this week, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the San Francisco 49ers. And if you just kind of look at it, I don't think this is really supposed to be a hard week. You've got 4 home teams favored by a touchdown or more against non-divisional foes. Should be easy, right? But could it be more complex than that? I don't know. You got to be careful about that banana in the tailpipe. And we need to know, what are your overall thoughts on this Survivor slate, Jamie G? Anything stick out in particular here about the number of options we have available? Any particular narratives? Anything jump out about the week from a Survivor standpoint?
Kind of a tough week, honestly, Mills. I think that I'm struggling here with some of the bigger favorites. You can kind of build a case against every favorite. And even some of the deeper picks that aren't quite favorites, you almost start to lean towards some of the dogs. So I think this might be one of those weeks. I'm not saying it's going to be a full-blown bloodbath like what we saw the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, but this week just feels a little bit more trickier. Not as many, you got kind of some of your worst teams playing other bad teams, so it makes that optionality not feel as good. But I think there's some sneaky plays here, and yeah, I don't know that it's going to be super chalky week for me, but I do like a couple of the favorites.
Yeah, I don't think there is a perfect favorite on the board this week. There's no team that I am just absolutely locked and loaded on, but definitely that's still a few options that I like out there. You're just going to have to be careful. And we're getting to the point of the season now where who you have used already is going to play a big factor. I think in a lot of leagues, you're going to see a funnel effect here because the teams that have survived have picked a lot of similar options to get to this point. So you might see teams getting funneled into maybe two of these options, specifically in certain leagues, depending on how it's worked out. So just something to pay attention to here when you're trying not to necessarily fall for that banana in the tailpipe. Definitely a week to exercise caution, but you got to pick somebody.
And remember, you got a 50-50 chance. We take every chance to remind you you need to have a plan and you absolutely need to get lucky. When it comes to making your plan, you need to have an idea which teams' other entries are using this week. To help you guys out with that, we're going to highlight the most popular Survivor teams heading into week 9.
Right up top, we have three teams in our first tier. We'll call them the tier one teams. We have the Baltimore Ravens again, 9-point favorites against the Broncos. Right now, they're picking up about 17% usage in the ESPN contest and 15% over on Yahoo. Next, we have the Cincinnati Bengals, 7-point favorites at home against the Raiders, picking up about 9% in ESPN, 19% over on Yahoo. Then we have my Philadelphia Eagles, 7.5-point favorites against the Jaguars, picking up about 6% ownership on ESPN and 23% over on Yahoo. We have two teams in tier two. How appropriate. We have the New Orleans Saints, 7-point favorites at Carolina, picking up about 13% in ESPN Eliminator contest entries and 7% over on Yahoo. Then we have the Kansas City Chiefs, 8.5-point favorites versus the Bucks, picking up about 10% on ESPN, 6% over on Yahoo. And then finally, three teams in tier three, also very appropriate. We have Jamie G's Buffalo Bills, 6-point favorites versus the Miami Dolphins, picking up about 2% on ESPN, 6% on Yahoo. And then we have the Houston Texans at the Jets on Thursday Night Football, picking up about 6% on ESPN, 3% on Yahoo, even though they are technically 1.5-point dogs. And then finally, the Minnesota Vikings, 5-point favorites versus Joe Flacco and the Colts, picking up about 2% on ESPN, 15% over on Yahoo. And you can tell, like, when you get into tier three there, some of those numbers are kind of spread out. There were a couple of teams who kind of just could have snuck in, but we had to set the bar somewhere. Same thing kind of on the bar between tier one and tier two. Not necessarily as clear of a drop off there is every week. So again, like I said before, a lot of it's going to come down to who you have available, and hopefully within who you have available, you have a couple of decent options to choose from.
We're going to get the week 9 party started with our locks of the week. As the name implies, these are teams who we think are going to win, period. Nothing more complex than that. The only rule is that you can only use a team once as our lock. Mills, who have you taken so far, and who is going to be the lock for week 9?
JBG, I started out with your Buffalo Bills. Then I used my Philadelphia Eagles, the Cleveland Browns, San Francisco 49ers, Seattle Seahawks, Atlanta Falcons, Cincinnati Bengals, and the Detroit Lions. Couple ways I could go, JBG, but after kind of going back and forth on it a little bit, I am going to just go ahead and use the Baltimore Ravens. Definitely a bit nervous about them. But again, I've said it all the time. This is the way it shakes out. You have to use what you have available. I would like to use my Philadelphia Eagles, maybe your Buffalo Bills. Already used them. Can't pull the trigger here. So I'm going to go with the Ravens. On the season, you have used Houston, Dallas, Cincinnati, the Jets, San Francisco, my Philadelphia Eagles, the Washington Commanders, and Denver. Who is your lock for week 9?
This is gross. It's absolutely a gross, disgusting lock, but I think it's the week to do it. And Mills, I look at the schedule and I still believe the Carolina rule is in effect. I'm going to take New Orleans. I'm going to take New Orleans in a divisional matchup against Carolina. Carolina's very bad. I understand they're at home. That doesn't mean anything. You ever go to a game in Charlotte, it's basically it feels like a preseason game, and nothing against their fans. They're passionate and everything, but it's just not the home field advantage because they're not a winning program. And I think New Orleans gets David Carr back, or Derek Carr back here, and New Orleans gets Derek Carr back, and I think that they get right here. when else are you going to use this team? Also, I don't expect it to have tons of ownership because I think a lot of people are down on New Orleans, and rightfully so. They got out of the season like an absolute buzzsaw, scoring 90 points in the first 2 games, and I don't know that they've scored 90 cents combined in the last 7 games, but 6 games. But I think they get right this week. It takes some stones, but we're at that point in the season where if you really want to separate yourself, man, I think this is it, Mills. This is my Alamo moment. I'm going to take New Orleans.
I think that's an excellent point, especially the bigger content you're in, the more entries that are left. The fact that when else are you going to feel great about using New Orleans? And I mean, obviously, you don't feel great about using them here, but it does
Right.
make sense. You have to feel worse about the Panthers. Bryce Young is going to start again. And would it move the needle if they don't have Derek Carr? I don't think it really would for me. If I'm going more against the Panthers than with the Saints, I would say. So I don't know that it moves the needle, whether it's Carr, whether it's Jake Hayner, or whether it's Spencer Rattler, right?
Yeah, I think, if it's Carr, obviously, I think I feel the best.
Correct. Yeah.
But I think they can probably win this game with any of them. I just do.
Feels like a great spot for one of those classic Alvin Kamara 3 or 4 touchdown games.
It really does. Get ready because it's time to roll into the deep. These are what we call our deep picks, where we try to find teams who aren't being used on many survivor entries for this particular week. Week 9, 2 rules on these. We can't use a highly owned team. That would defeat the purpose. So nobody in tier 1 or tier 2. And we can only use a team once as our deep. Adding a little bit of structure to this thing makes it a little bit more, a little tough. Mills, who do we use so far? What's going on with the deeps?
As far as the deeps that we can and can't use this week, nobody in tier 1 or 2. So no Baltimore, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, New Orleans, or Kansas City on the season. You have used the Los Angeles Chargers, the New York Jets, Tennessee, Pittsburgh, Minnesota, Detroit, Atlanta, and Green Bay. Who is your deep for week 9?
I'm going to take the Rams here. Another divisional game. It's not intentional. And this isn't just about my Bills going up and laying the smackdown on Seattle. I expect them to have a better game. But I just think the Rams are starting to really hit their stride. They've got the receivers back. Matthew Stafford's playing at a good level. And I think the defensive front, which is a bunch of young players out of Florida State, but very good players, is starting to kind of come into its own. Geno has not had the type of protection that he needs to have, the type of success that he's capable of with the weapons around him. And I think this defensive front from the Rams can get after him. And offensively, I think the Rams are going to be able to move the football and score. So I got the Rams going up there and beating up on Seattle here, man. I like them. They're only I think 2.5-point favorites. I like this one.
I like that you are just having conviction about it. You know what I mean? And that's what you have to do when you're going with a deep pick. And again, the deeper the contest you're in, the more entries that are left, the more important it is to dive down a bit deeper. On the season, I have used Minnesota, Indianapolis, Seattle, Pittsburgh, Denver, Tampa Bay, the Los Angeles Chargers, and Houston. You left them for me. We don't like to double up unless it necessarily has to kind of work out that way. I am going to take the Washington Commanders at the Giants. I'm a little surprised they're not picking up more ownership. And again, I know the game against the Bears wasn't the best last week, but I am very down on the Giants right now. Outside of that defensive line, they are struggling everywhere. The loss of left tackle Andrew Thomas has been devastating to that offense. Teams are just shutting down Malik Neighbors, daring to do anything else. Tyrone Tracy's been okay. Wan'Dale Robinson's been okay. You can kind of squint and see the pieces for the future here. But I always get down on a team when their offensive line struggles, especially if the quarterback can't elevate his play in a poor situation. It's looking bad over there. When your team has to keep coming out every week and saying that the starting quarterback is still the starter, you're having a problem. So I'm taking the Commanders here, and I'm going against the Giants as much as I am with Washington. But I feel very good about that one, despite the fact that it is a divisional matchup.
Most weeks in Survivor contests, the majority of the ownership is concentrated on just a handful of teams. That's for good reason. Despite that, one or more of those teams loses each and every week. Look at the first couple weeks of this season. It's crazy. So it's not just about picking winners here. It's also about avoiding the potential landmines. We try to help you do that with our fades of the week. We're only fading teams that are being used by a significant number of entries, and we fade a team as many times as we damn well please. Mills, give us a year-to-date fades.
As far as myself, I have I was doing pretty good the first 2 weeks. Faded Cincinnati and Baltimore. Those both work. Been on a cold one here in my fade since New York Jets, Cincinnati Bengals, Kansas City Chiefs, San Francisco 49ers, my Philadelphia Eagles, and the Kansas City Chiefs once again. I don't necessarily want to go back to that. Well, I'm in a really tough spot here, but unfortunately, I guess I have to fade my Philadelphia Eagles. It's just a math thing here, and I worry a little bit about the Doug Peterson factor. It shouldn't be a thing, but now the Jaguars are in a spot where nobody believes in him. They had the wide receiver injuries. I think it's going to turn out to be kind of ugly for the Eagles. I hope they win, but I think the Jaguars have at least a puncher's chance here. That scares me enough to move off the Eagles. They do still have a game with Carolina left on the schedule. So if I have them left, I think I'm trying to keep my powder dry for that week. Hopefully they avoid the upset, but it does worry me a bit. On the season, Jamie G, you also started out hot. You hit your first 3 fades, Cincinnati, San Francisco, and the Las Vegas Raiders. Also been on a cold one since, missing with Houston, Chicago, Baltimore, Jacksonville, and Kansas City. Who are you fading for week 9?
Yeah, and look, I promise I'm not going to just do this each and every week until they lose, but I am going to continue to fade the Kansas City Chiefs this week. Here's why. You watch what the Chiefs are doing and give them credit. They're winning games. They're 7-0. But when you look at them, they're really begging, and I mean just begging to lose these games. I mean, multiple times against the Raiders, they were in a position to lose that game, and the Raiders just couldn't get out of their own way. Mahomes continues to throw interceptions. They don't have the huge spark on offense. They're depending on an aging Kareem Hunt and Travis Kelce to really generate the offense for them. I understand they traded for DeAndre Hopkins. I don't expect a huge, robust lift, at least not early on here. They're a defensive team. And I just think that, Tampa Bay's feisty, man. And if they can get the run game going here and Baker has a good Baker day, Kansas City is literally begging to lose one of these games. And I just think it's going to happen. And so, I got Tampa Bay as an upset here, winning a big one on the road. I think Kansas City's going to lose, and it's going to happen, soon. So that's where I'm at with it, Mills.
Fair enough. I think this is a kind of a double-edged sword here, whatever you want to call it, because not only do you have the fact that Tampa Bay, same thing, all the injuries, no one kind of believes in him. The Chiefs have not been playing as good as your record would have you believe. I think they have a puncher's chance, but then the Chiefs have 2 very, very sweet matchups in weeks 12 and 13 coming up. So again, another team, even if you're not necessarily fading because you think they're going to lose, I think it's a good strategy play to put them off if you think you can do so, if you have good enough options here. And then if you add in the chance that, you really feel like they're just going to catch a big upset sooner or later, I don't mind him, man. And Baker's doing a lot with a little. He's turning the ball over, but he's putting points on the board. So that's one thing the Chiefs really haven't done well, is put points on the board. If they can turn this into a shootout, I like the Bucs' chances.
Hopefully, we've already helped you out. If not, no worries, because it's time for our top 5 to stay alive for week 9. This is exactly what it sounds like. Our top 5 survivor options for this week.
Despite our worries here, we're pretty tight up top here. And in fact, we have 2 ties within our top 5. So we have a tie technically for number 4 between Kansas City, again, versus Tampa Bay, -8.5, and the Baltimore Ravens versus Denver, -9. The only team not tied here, Jamie G, your Buffalo Bills, standing strong at number 3. And then we have a 2-way tie up top between the Cincinnati Bengals at home versus the Raiders and my Philadelphia Eagles versus the Jaguars. The highest teams not to make it here, Jamie G, my Washington Commanders pick as my deep didn't make it. You had them at 9, and then you had the Saints at 6. I had them at 8. You already took the Saints as your lock. I think you explained that pretty well. Any thoughts on why you had Washington down at 9?
Little worried about the come down game. That was a big emotional win there with the Hail Mary. I still think that I'm not convinced that Jaden Daniels is fully healthy, and he took a bunch of shots in that game too, to the ribs. It wasn't like it was a clean game for him. He definitely got hit. Credit him. He stood in there tough, and they got the win. But I just worry about a little bit of the divisional aspect of it. And then, of course, that coming off that emotional win, it just feels like maybe a little bit of a letdown spot.
So to me, it sounds like a tiny worry about Jaden Daniels and then mostly just a gut feeling.
Yeah, I think it just feels.
I mean,
like,
there's not much you can look at the Giants and say like you're worried that they would win. It has to be more that the Commanders blow it. I think. I don't Unless you're
Yeah,
seeing something from the Giants, I'm not.
not at all. I mean, at times the Giants have been able to move the football, but they struggle to score any kind of points, and it's just mistake after mistake after mistake. I think defensively they're above average. The front four is pretty good, and I worry about Jaden Daniels' ability to escape with the rib, I'm not in love with Washington's defense, but I think it's good enough to stop the Giants. It just feels like a letdown game. I don't know that there's a ton of science behind that. It's more so just kind of feel here of that. I could see that being a little bit of a letdown after what a crazy, that play will be remembered for generations in Washington. So it's kind of, there's something to be said about a little bit of a letdown from that, I think.
I get it. So pretty much like, yeah, because I mean, the Giants defense, they were good, but they've given up 26 and 28 points the last 2 weeks. I just don't think they're trending in that direction. So, that's, if the Commanders were picking up the same kind of ownership and they were in tier one, I think I would be a lot more worried about that. But considering how hard it is to find a deep this week, I'm willing to kind of take a chance on the narrative thing, just on the idea that even if they do come out of the gate a little bit slow or struggle a little bit, that the Giants are going to have a whole set of problems of their own.
Have you ever spent a ton of time doing something only to stop and think, maybe it's not more complex than that? Well, that's what we're trying to find out. This is a system where each week we're taking the biggest favorite who we haven't used yet as our pick. That's it. Nothing more complex than that. It's literally a simple system. Mills, through 8 weeks, how complex do things appear?
Early in the season, this was a complete mess. This started out 0-5. Things were very, very complex. But after the Lions won last week, the system has won 3 in a row, so up to 3-5 on the season. This week, the biggest favorite on the board is the Ravens. Already used them. So next up, we have your fade, Kansas City, -8.5 versus Tennessee. They're available. We're taking them. So I think despite the recent success here, overall, things are more complex than that. But we'll see where week 9 and the rest of the season takes us.
The dude abides. And on Survivor 2024, we abide by the wheel in the sky. Every week, we put all the favorite teams who we haven't used yet on a wheel in the sky, and then we spin it to determine our pick. No system at all, just random chance. And it could be good, it could be bad. That's the chance. Mills, how has the wheel abided so far this season?
Another slow start here. The wheel was 0-2 out the gate, but last week the wheel chose your Buffalo Bills. That's 6 in a row for the wheel, up to 6-2 on the year. This week, between the buys and the teams we've already used, we only have 9 teams on the wheel. Let's see if we can make it lucky number 7. Here we go. Let's abide by the wheel in the sky. Week 9, let's go wheel. Schwartz. Wheel. Schwartz.
No, dude. No.
Stop.
All right.
I can live with Minnesota. I can live with Minnesota. Flacco's been all right. Let's see if he can unlock Jonathan Taylor, but the Colts defense has a lot of issues of their own, and the Vikings still have been able to put points up on most teams. So, this is what the wheel has done, though. Every week it gets us into a little bit of an uncomfortable place, like the backs of a Volkswagen, but it's come through so far. So if it keeps doing this, I'm going to put a lot of faith in the wheel. So the wheel's building up my trust. Hopefully it doesn't dash it here with a poor one. Let's make it 7 in a row.
During our 2024 season preview, we revealed our grand plan for the 2024 season. Give us the weekly update on how our grand plan for Survivor for 2024 is shaking out.
Pretty grand, I think. The plan started 2-0, super hot. We were very excited about that, then lost 2-0. I'm very less excited about that. But after the Lions win last week, 4 in a row for the plan, up to 6-2 on the season. And I think we're on solid footing once again this week, because the plan has us taking one of the biggest favorites on the board, a team we really haven't mentioned that much, the Cincinnati Bengals, 7-point favorites at home against the Raiders. Anything on this? Ironically enough, I don't think we've said a word about the Bengals versus the Raiders here. And while I do not have oodles of confidence in the Bengals, I have almost no confidence in the Raiders. Would it shock me if the Bengals blew this game? Not really, but I think the Raiders are legitimately going to put Desmond Ridder in at some point this week. But he also did go to the University of Cincinnati, so who knows? I can even make that happen a little bit weird. Any thoughts on the Bengals, just to help people out, because we really haven't mentioned them?
It's a weird one, man. I have trouble kind of trusting them at this point. It's at times it looked like, all right, the offense is going to be there to bail out the defense, and then at other times the defense. I don't know, man. I think they're a mess. I think their backs are up against the wall, and I think it's a failed season, and I think kind of the players are starting to know it. And we'll see what happens. They're a little bit of a mystery to me, man. I just don't feel very comfortable week in and week out, really dependent on the Bengals to win.
Yeah, I don't blame. I'd feel better if T. Higgins plays, put it that way. I think that would
Yeah,
definitely
I
add
would too.
a certain degree of confidence to that over there. And they might be getting their tackle back as well on the line. So that could help. So definitely one to keep an eye on there. But that's who the plan has us taking. So that's who we're taking here.
The final order of business is to make our contest picks. We've got a head-to-head contest that started in week 1, in which Magnum Mills, his truly, he was declared the winner. Good for him. But we're playing it out for bragging rights. And of course, we got to get a little side action. Mills, we both got wins last week. Who are you taking in week 9?
Okay, easy on the side action. That always comes up in my divorce proceedings for some reason. On the season in this contest, I have used Buffalo, Philadelphia, Seattle, Pittsburgh, Denver, Baltimore, Washington, and what up Detroit. Why not, Jamie G? I already won. I know there's side action on the line, but you took them as your lock. Don't know when I'll use them again. Give me the New Orleans Saints. Carolina rule in effect. On the year, you have used the Bills, Eagles, Bengals, Jets, Vikings, Texans, Commanders, and what up Detroit, the Lions. Who are you rolling with in week 9?
Make it 2, baby. I'm taking Nolans. Give me the Saints. The Saints go marching on. It's just too good of a spot. I know it's gross. I know it's terrible, but sometimes you got to be nasty. And Loretta, you nasty. I'm all over it this week. Give me the Saints. Well, shout out to Uncle June because it's already week 3 of our mid-season Survivor contest. A little Survivor Junior going on here. And this is exactly the same as any other Survivor contest, except that it started in week 7. And remember, a tie absolutely counts as a loss. I already won this because Mills decided to get tricky in the first week. I am the champion, but we're going to keep it going just for shits and gigs. So far, I've used the Bills and the Lions. Mills, man, this one, I don't necessarily want to double up, but you know what? I'm going to go ahead and take Baltimore.
Okay, all right. Switching it up a little bit. You can't double barrel, and actually, that would have been a triple barrel for you on New Orleans. So maybe that is a bridge too far.
It was a bit. It's too much exposure to Nolans, but I'm good with Baltimore. Let's go ahead and do it.
Sounds good. I have used the Chargers and Broncos, and we just mentioned them. It's a weird spot. I don't know when I'll feel great about using them throughout the rest of the season. A lot of divisional matchups left on the board. Why not? Give me Cincinnati. I'll take the Bengals here. Playing with house money. You already won, so I'm borrowing money from you that I'm playing with. So don't feel bad if I lose your money.
Spoken like a man who's hedging against any potential loss. We love it. Good luck, everybody, this week. Anything else before we get out of here?
Just be careful. This is a tricky one. Make sure you pay attention to the injury reports, the weather, everything like that. We're getting later into the season. Stuff happens. Know who is left in your contest, how many entries are left. Least number of them there are, the fewer number. You want to look at them, try to figure out who they've used already, because that should probably have a little bit of an impact on who you pick going forward. So it's definitely getting down to the nitty gritty here. Know as many things about your contest as you can.
Thank you guys for checking out Survivor 2024. We're here each and every week during the regular season to make sure that you are the last entry standing in your NFL Survivor and Eliminator contest. We really appreciate you guys being with us for this. Let us know who you're taking this week. Best thing you can do is go ahead and hit the thumb and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Then drop a comment or send me your top Survivor pick. Who you going with? Send it in our DMs. Mills will let you know where you can find all of our stuff.
You can find us wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Survivor 2024 is presented by Seize the Gap Fantasy Football. You can find us on social media at Seize the Gap FF. Same place on the World Wide Web, seizethegapff.com. Very simple and easy to remember, just like the flaps. Follow, like, and please subscribe. If you had fun, please remember, hit the thumb. I'm Magnum Mills. He's Jamie G. Remember to have a plan and get lucky.
Stay lucky, my friends.
The most daredevil group of daffy drivers to ever whirl their wheels in the wacky races.
Here are the Wacky Racers, strung out on the next lap of today's wacky race, which incidentally will take them on a grueling zigzag route to Mustard Spread, Arkansas, attempting to gain the lead.